Hello and welcome back to my channel where we discuss all things etiquette. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. In our last video, we talked about pronunciation and enunciation of words. And I gave you a couple of hints, couple of things that can help you with your vocabulary, with your speech, especially when you're meeting new people. And here is one of them. Remember I told you you need to do what? Read more. And it really doesn't matter what you're reading. Hopefully you're reading something educational. But regardless, reading helps broaden your vocabulary and it helps with your speaking. So you need to read more. The second thing that I told you to do is to find 3 famous people. And you're going to watch interviews of them. And I told you if they are singers, we're not watching videos. If they are actors or actresses, we want to watch the interviews. You want to see how they communicate, how they pronunciate, articulate their words. You want to see how they answer questions that's posed to them. It could also be a famous ball player, but regardless, you want to watch interviews of famous people who speak well. Speak well. That's the key, because oftentimes you have people in interviews that don't speak well. And we know them. We have seen them on television. So remember, I also told you, if you listen to the news of your local and international news, sometimes you can hear a difference in the way they pronunciate words, how it sounds. They may be talking about the exact same thing, but it sounds different. And you can pick up that they may be from the north or from the deep south or something of that nature. Okay? Also, in the last video, I talked to you about your volume when you are speaking, especially in a restaurant setting. And there is something that I want to share with you that I left out of the last video. When you are in a restaurant with a group of people or just one-on-one, when you are talking, if you have food in your mouth, finish the food that's in there. Because remember, I talked about the sound comes from the diaphragm. It doesn't come from the chest. It doesn't come from the throat. Your vocal cords are in your throat. Your lungs are here, but your volume comes from your diaphragm. And you want your sound to do what? To project. So the person or the group of people in front of you can hear what you are saying. They want to hear you clearly. Well, if you're eating and you have food in your mouth, don't put your hand in front of your face. Finish the food that you are eating. Finish the beverage you are drinking. If you need to hold up a finger to tell your guests, hold on a second. Finish chewing and swallow and clear your mouth. Then engage in the conversation. When you put your hand in front of your mouth because you have food there, you stop the communication right here. People have difficulty hearing you clearly when you put a hand in front of your face. Sometimes people do things that are trendy, but not necessarily correct. And that is something that is trendy. You see people out in restaurants, in coffee shops, and they're doing this and they're putting it, and you expect for people to hear what you're saying. You're speaking here. Your voice is going in here. It is not projecting out here. Your voice has to project out here for people to hear you. So clear the food in your mouth, clear the beverage from your mouth, and then talk. If you have to hold up a finger while you clear the food and the beverage, do that. But do not put your hand in front of your face here and expect for people to be able to hear you clearly. I should have included that in the last video, but I neglected that. So now you have it. So we're going to talk about language, dialect, and accent. This is something that I hear often. Language is the overall thing here. So we're going to say English because that's what we mostly speak here in America. And then you have dialect, and then you have accent. Sometimes when you hear a person speak from somewhere else, people say, "Oh, I hear your accent." Do you truly hear an accent, or are you picking up the dialect? Okay, so the overall thing, the overall umbrella is the language. We're going to go with English. But when you are meeting someone from a different place, you'll hear a dialect. A dialect is a different vocabulary that people use that's common to the area where they're from. Grammar is really based off of their region. So you have people in the north, people in the south. You have people on islands like the Gullah Geechee Islands. They have a different vocabulary, but is regional where they're from. So when you meet people, sometimes you can hear they're saying words that you're not familiar with. This is their particular vocabulary. I'm going to give you an example of that. So where I live in Southeast Louisiana. And we have words here that people in other parts of the United States may not use. For example, let's say a person is cooking, a lady is cooking, or a man, and in some other places in the United States, they will use the word a gravy. A gravy. This is vocabulary now. But where I am from, we don't call it gravy. We call it a roux. It's language. Then we'll go to the accent. There are words that you may hear someone use from the deep south that is the same as another state in another part of the country. This is where your accent comes in because it sounds different. It's the same word, but you're pronouncing it differently. Here's an example of that. And I'm going to say it how I pronounce the word. Tomato, potato, roach. Now, someone in the north may say that's a country accent or a southern accent. But we can say the same words, but it will just sound different. So when you are talking to someone and you hear these things, think to yourself, am I hearing a dialect, which is different vocabulary based off of their region, or am I hearing an accent? You see. Let me give you another example. When I was teaching high school in Texas, and a lot of these families in the area where I was teaching came from Louisiana, but the students never lived in Louisiana. It was their parents and grandparents that did. And I was teaching, and when I would say the word tomato or potato, they couldn't understand what I was saying. And I repeated myself and repeated myself. And I'm like, why don't these children understand these words? It was because of what? The dialect or the accent? It's the accent, not the dialect, because they know what a tomato is, but it's the accent that they don't understand. And we're going to talk about that, okay? So you understand that the overall umbrella is language, and under language you have the dialect and you have the accent. Okay. Now it is considered rude when you meet someone from a different part of the world, and they may be speaking English, but they may have a different what dialect or accent. It could be a different dialect. It could be a different accent. And why do I say a different dialect? I say a different dialect because remember, dialect is your grammar. So where you may, for example, call this particular thing in a restaurant or hotel an elevator, some places in the world don't call it an elevator. They call it a lift. That happened to me. I didn't know what a lift was. I quickly found out though. But when you hear people with a different dialect, respect it because they are speaking English, they just have a different word. Okay. Now, but sometimes the pronunciation of certain words, the same word, is a different accent. I live in Baton Rouge. People from New Orleans have a different accent than people in Baton Rouge. People in Lafayette have a different accent. Opelousas have a different accent. North Louisiana has a different accent. But we could be using the same dialect, the same words, just a different accent. Now, when you are speaking to someone, you have to gauge the environment. Remember, we talked about the environment. Because sometimes you can switch codes, turn the switch on and off. The switch on is when you're speaking this correct standardized English. You're using the right volume, you're pronouncing your words correctly, you're articulating well, all of that. If you're speaking to someone in a professional setting, you're speaking to professional people, switch on, code switch on. But if you're with your group of people and you all are just at home hanging out, something like that, very chill environment, switch off, code switch off. And here is when you may not be so inclined to speak perfectly. Let's say that. When I turn the switch off, which is not very often, there are just a few things that I may say differently. When the switch is off and I'm speaking to my adult children or my friends, my female friends, they may hear me say, baby, no. Or I don't do well with roaches. You can hear the what? Do you hear the dialect or the accent? You hear the accent. You may hear a little bit of the dialect there also, because when I tell you, if somebody has done something, let's say totally ridiculous, and I say, baby, that in another part of the country, somebody may say, child, or really? So we are alluding to the same type of reaction. We're just using different words, vocabulary, that's dialect. But when I say baby, my baby may be different than California saying it. That's what? Accent. So it's very interesting when you meet people from all over the United States, all over the world, and you hear how they speak. I love it. I absolutely love it, especially if it's in another country and they're speaking English. Like I said, their vocabulary can be different. I did not know a lift was an elevator in certain places of the world. So remember, when you are eating out at a restaurant, having a beverage somewhere, and you have food, beverage in your mouth, clear what's in your mouth. Do not hold your hand up to your mouth, because when you do this, what happens? You stop the projection of what you're saying. Code on. We're out with family and friends in a restaurant and we're eating. We need to be acting in a proper fashion. Correct standardized English. Code on. We get in the car to go home. We're just full and we're happy. We're content. You may switch the code off. Now, in order to switch the code on and off, you have to know when you need code on and code off. You need to know when are you speaking in code on. Do you know? You need to practice it. This is why I told you, read more, watch interviews, and this is my strong opinion. In order to be able to proficiently speak well, correct standardized English, and utilize everything from the pronunciation, enunciation, and articulation, you need to make it code on all the time. Once you have mastered code on, then you can start to loosen up code off when you're just in relaxed, chill mode. If you want to. I don't do code off very often, but you have to master that in order to be able to know when you're not in the correct mode for the environment you are in. Okay? If you were in my classroom at this time, I would say, are there any questions? Anybody did not understand me? Does everyone understand what I said? But I know you all did. So what I'm going to leave you with today is the same thing that I told you before. To do what? Read more. Go on whatever you watch on television, or if it's on YouTube or the news. Those 3 famous people, watch those interviews. Watch them. Also, be mindful to assess yourself when you go out with your family and friends to restaurants. When you're eating, do you find yourself with food in your mouth and you're doing this? If you find yourself doing this, correct yourself. Correct yourself, because when you do this, now you have people that have to ask you, huh? I can't hear you. Okay. Just correct yourself until you make it a habit to not do that. You have to program yourself to not do that. Just because you see others doing it out in public or on the internet does not make it correct. Okay? Also, now that we have a clear understanding that the umbrella is the language, and then we have the dialect and we have the accent, pay attention to when you meet new people, especially if they're not from the area that you're in. Just listen to them. Language can be such a beautiful thing, and especially if you meet people from other countries. It's beautiful to hear how they pronounce words, hear their vocabulary. Oh yes, you can learn some things. And maybe one day you can be able to share those stories with your family and friends. So, with that being said, we have talked about the pronunciation, articulation, enunciation, the umbrella that's language, and the dialect, and the accent, and the not putting the hand in front of the face when you're eating. I think we've covered a good bit for today. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And until we meet next time, don't forget all things etiquette.